my friend from many years, former communications director for Mayor Dennis Archer. His kids are the same age as my kids. This brother worked with us over the years as a communications expert extraordinaire. He has a very sharply defined perspective on political issues. I admire the way he thinks and the way that he operates. I applaud his leadership. Please welcome Greg Bowens.
Thank you. It's such an honor and a privilege to be here today to be home with the allies and the family. And you know, I am a public and media relations professional. I've been apparently reached a new level here of being called an activist by the media because of some of the issues that I've worked on, some of them with many of the people in the room, even my man over there where we got the emergency manager law repealed. And so, are there any veterans in the house? One, two? Okay, yes, I'm a veteran. And we had Veterans Day yesterday, and I was thinking about this before I came here, because we are in such an interesting time in Detroit right now. And I thought about the Pledge of Allegiance. Y'all remember the Pledge of Allegiance? It was first done in 1892. The guy came up with it. His name was Francis Bellamy. He was a Baptist minister, actually, and a socialist. And when he came up with the words of the Pledge of Allegiance, I pledge allegiance to the flag, to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. He wanted to include in that the word equality. But he knew that the people in the National Education Association would not accept the idea of including equality, because that meant you would have to include black folks. So they kept that out, the word equality, and marched on to do the Pledge of Allegiance. And what's interesting is that the guy that came up with it thought of it as a way to create community and fraternity among folks right after the Civil War. They felt like that we were falling apart as a country, and this could be a good way to infuse young people with the ideas of a commitment to the principles that make the country great. And so in 1892, they had Columbus Day, and the guy really pushed to have this happen. Well, the way that he got it done was by hooking up with who? A consultant. A guy that wanted to increase the flag sales to public schools and to sell more magazines. It was a children's magazine. And so they used this as a vehicle, the Pledge of Allegiance, to get this done. They wanted a flag in front of every school. They wanted magazines in every school promoting this particular idea and whatever they were trying to sell to kids. And so the Pledge of Allegiance took off and went through 4 different sort of iterations, and it was adopted by Congress in 1942, and 12 years later they added the phrase, under God. But still, no equality. That was still missing from it, and is still not added today. What's interesting about that, and the reason why I talk about it in relationship to now, is because the idea to do the Pledge of Allegiance so that people can explore and get committed to the principles of liberty and justice and those other things that are supposed to make the United States great is, I still think, a very good idea. And it is needed now more than ever here in Michigan, where we are under an emergency manager. Now, I've talked about this for a long time, and I've been saying it on the news and stuff like that, is that our newly elected folks, not only do they have to figure out where the bathroom is because they haven't been there before, but they've got to ask for the keys to the bathroom. They got to ask for permission to use it. It's not assumed anymore that it is a right of their position to just be able to exercise the powers that are given to elected officials every place else around the state. And so when you have the kind of situation we have, where here in Michigan, in many cities, liberty is denied. And so we have an election to elect people to represent us and represent our community and help the fabric of society move forward on all kinds of pressing issues, from infrastructure to street lights to traffic patterns to, you know, new housing, old housing. These are really big issues. There's no aspect of our life that is not touched by government in some kind of way. And so the idea that we have to beg for power should be insulting to every single one of us.
Yes, sir.
Mike Duggan got elected in this tidal wave here, and he is going to ask the governor, what powers can I have? Well, guess what? You get the same powers that Dave Bean got. Maybe you'll get a little more because, you know, you're supposed to be a turnaround expert. But at the same time, we've seen the shared power arrangement not work at DPS. If you recall, the emergency manager was sent there and was supposed to handle the finances, and then you had the board that was supposed to handle the education. Well, what they found pretty quickly was that every educational decision that you make impacts the finances in some kind of way, and so they said, well, we can't have that. So now, in the room of allies that we have, I'm willing to bet that a majority of people, I would venture 80% of the people here, cannot name all the members of the Detroit Public School Board. All of them. We all know the president. We can remember him, but we remember him because he's out there advocating on lots of different issues, not just education. The reason why you can't remember their names anymore is because they have been pushed to the side and rendered rather irrelevant to the education and the governance of children in the city of Detroit. That's right. You can go around to the different cities where you've had an emergency manager and you will find the same kind of phenomenon happening, where the elected officials are just sort of disappear. You don't know who they are on city council. You know the mayor a little bit, but I remember when I could always remember who the mayor of Pontiac was. Not so true anymore. Who's the president of the city council in Pontiac? Let's go to Flint. You know, these places. And so the mayor here has all but disappeared. Not that I think that he really wanted to disappear, but because he has no real role. And so where is the justice in that? Liberty denied in a Fox democracy that strips elected leaders of their ability to govern is unacceptable and should be unacceptable to everybody going into city council right now. Mike Duggan is having conversations with the governor asking what kind of power he has, who is the city council's representative to make sure that the check and balance is going to happen there. Do we end up, let's say the bankruptcy that is going on right now actually gets denied by the federal judge, to which I say Kevin Orr becomes the governor's patsy in all of this, and they decide, well, you know what, we'll just marry what we don't have right now, which is we have, as a state, we have the legal authority to do what we do, but we don't have the moral authority of the people who are being governed to do what we do. So you guys have the moral authority because you've been elected. Mike Duggan has the moral authority because he's been elected, but you don't have the legal authority to do all the things you need to do to supposedly turn around Detroit, right? How do they get that? Well, they can marry the two by making Mike Duggan the emergency manager. Who? Could it happen? Why couldn't it happen? Well, the law's supposed to prevent it. We saw how they changed the law at the 11th hour. And so if that happens, we would have a serious unbalance of power because the elected officials are beholden to the emergency manager. He or she decides how much money you get. He or she decides if you get paid at all. They decide if you have an office. They can strip you of your authority anytime they feel like it. We saw it happen with Charles Pugh. The media reacted a little bit saying, whoa, we didn't know that you could do that. And then they just kept on going. So the question really becomes, when you're elected, who do you serve in this kind of environment? When the interests of the corporatocracy clash with the interests of the people, and Kevin Orr doesn't agree with what you're doing, are you willing to risk your neck, willing to risk your paycheck, willing to risk your office, willing to risk that car, willing to risk, you know, the 1 or 2 staff members that you get to have on a 90-day contract for the sake of the people? Or will you just be a collaborator and go along and say, if we go along and continue to go along, then eventually the emergency manager is going to leave? There is nothing on the law books that says in 18 months Kevin Orr has to leave. He has a contract. That contract can be extended anytime the governor thinks about it. Right. You can vote out the emergency manager, but you can't vote out the position. And even if you do vote out the emergency manager, the governor has to sign off on it. So the idea that somehow if we cooperate and capitulate, then we will have a bigger voice than we would if we did not. And so I think that we have to, as allies, we want to support, I believe, our newly elected city council. I think the average age on city council now, Hester, is under 40. If I'm not, certainly under 50. George Cushenberry is being the senior statesman on the city council now. And with five new people? Correct. Five new people on there. The idea that you have been exposed and you don't know what you've already lost because you haven't been there. And so it'd be real easy to just go in and do the mundane work of a city council. But remember this, there is nothing that city council can do that becomes law unless the emergency manager approves. So you can sit and represent and be happy that you got elected and go back to your districts, and every time you can't get something done, you can blame it on the governor. You know, you can blame it on Kevin Orr. We can't get the resources, we can't do this, but don't push back too hard because you might get a pay cut. And if you do that, you know, what would be your second job on this? I suppose the question that we all have to ask ourselves right now in relationship to supporting our city council members and the elected people is that, will we be heroes of the republic or will we be collaborators in its demise? Because that is where we stand right now. And the model that they're using in Michigan is a model that they want to take around the country. So if we will not stand up for liberty here, where will liberty survive? That's my question. Thanks.
Ooh-wee. Ooh-wee. That's very good.